Bitcoiners around the world celebrated the Bitcoin legend Hal Finney's birthday over the weekend. So we look back at his incredible life and the massive growth of the Bitcoin network since Finney posted his iconic tweet, running Bitcoin back in 2009. Bitcoin haters continue to be in disbelief as Bitcoin surpasses 1 billion transactions and over $100 trillion in volume, while crypto bros are still looking for a use case outside of gambling. As thousands of Buffett and Munger disciples descended upon Omaha, Nebraska this weekend for the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, we take a look back at Charlie Munger's classic coining of Bitcoin as rat poison. And to his credit, its returns have been killer ever since. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bitcoin Daily. I'm Dante Cook, head of Swan Business. Hurley, the producer of this show, my partner in crime, and I both celebrated our birthdays this weekend. I celebrated my 34th birthday with a bunch of family and friends. And regardless of whether you're religious or not, it's widely known that the most under-discussed miracle that Jesus ever did was having 12 friends over 30 as a man. Speaking of birthdays this weekend, we also celebrated the late, great Bitcoin legend Hal Finney's birthday. Hal Finney worked directly with Satoshi Nakamoto and predicted that Bitcoin would be worth over $10 million a coin just 2 days after it was released. He was a titan in the cypherpunk movement and one of the creators of PGP software, or encrypted email as we know it. And we all know that Hal Finney is famous for posting running Bitcoin on Twitter in 2009. But many people don't know that he also ran an incredible race against ALS. In his last public post, he talked about the devastating effects of ALS, saying that he's fed through one tube and he's breathing through another tube, and he operates his computer by using an eye tracking system. But this is what many people admire about Hal Finney, because despite those things and despite that diagnosis, he said, "My life isn't that bad. I can still read, listen to music, watch TV. Heck, I can even code." He said he still loved programming and it gave him goals. And even up to his last days, he was working on software, a Mike Hearn suggestion, to harden the security of Bitcoin wallets, saying that the code was already done, he just needed to create the documentation for it. What a legend. He represented the great parts that are in all of us, the desire that we all have to build something great and to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. And thanks to Hal and many others in the Bitcoin ecosystem, Bitcoin surpassed 1 billion transactions and over $100 trillion in volume through the network. The decentralized peer-to-peer network, which just started as an idea, has become the largest computer network in the world. And no, that's not just Bitcoiner speak. Actually, if you search what is the most powerful computer network in the world, Google will tell you that Bitcoin is by far the largest computer network in the world, being an order of magnitude larger than Amazon, Google, and Microsoft clouds combined that have been built over the last 15 to 20 years. There are still people out there who will still claim that Bitcoin has no value, even after having 1 billion transactions and $100 trillion in volume, with nobody being in between. And they will point to other crypto tokens or other Web3 or DeFi projects as having more success. But I urge you, do you really think that these protocols are successful? Listen to what the largest Web3 and crypto investor in the world had to say about the innovation happening in crypto.
I think there's things that are kind of at scale around blockchain. So, I mean, Bitcoin's the most obvious. And then I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with stable coins. I keep hearing more and more kind of both anecdotes and seeing data supporting the growth of stable coins, particularly in the developing world. I think that there's sort of these existing categories like, the financial things like DeFi and real world assets. I think a lot of that the growth will depend on some of the regulatory things getting figured out. But I have a very expansive view of blockchains. Like I think anything that can be built, any internet service can be built this way. There's an early but growing blockchain based social network called Farcaster that's interesting. That has a interesting feature where the sort of the economics are much better for the users. If you build a relationship with your audience, you can monetize, you can make money however you want, and the money doesn't flow to Twitter or Facebook, it flows to the creators, and it enables software developers to build new features on top. And so we're seeing a lot of excitement around that. Gaming is interesting. Video games, there's a bunch of interesting things there. Like we have one like called Pirate Nation. It's a sort of this. It's what's called an on-chain game, and it's interesting because the users can actually own the assets that they earn. I think we had a first wave of games a couple of years ago based on blockchains, and some of them were just sort of too much about the financial aspects. Now we're seeing a new wave where people are building really interesting games. Games are always important in computing because they just, if you early mobile phones, games were a big driver of growth. Just generally, it's a great way to kind of get early users on board. And kind of collectibles, and like with my book, we have an NFT that's sort of proof that you're one of the first. It's fun. It's just a souvenir, but it's sort of a fun souvenir to show you're one of the first people, and people think it's fun. I mean, it's not, So I think things like that are interesting.
Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz manages a $7 billion fund. And the greatest thing that he can say so far are things that have already been built on the Bitcoin network. I mean, a way that creators can monetize their posts and their content without anyone being in between. That's called Noster. Or being able to monetize video games with a currency that people can actually own. I think Zebedee's been doing this for years already. These innovations have already been built on top of the Bitcoin network and are continuing to show why Bitcoin is not only the best store of value, but also the most useful crypto in the entire space. And just because I had to, this is an email that Coinbase sent to me this morning. The subject line was "Trade What's Trending." And as you can see in the picture, it shows Ethereum and Bitcoin and a few stable coins, along with some other coins that I will not mention on this show. But when you click through the email, this is what it shows you on the other side. But hey, if Tom Brady, who was a master at reading coverages and disguised coverages for over 20 years in the NFL with everybody gunning for him, if he can be duped, I guess we can too.
Tom also lost $30 million in crypto. Tom, how did you fall for that? I mean, even Gronk was like, me know that not real money. Like...
Speaking of trading, the SEC has issued Robinhood, the major crypto exchange, a Wells notice for its operations, as well as being a broker that offered unregistered securities. It's fascinating. All of these gateway apps, regardless of whether they recognize Bitcoin as a legitimate asset or not, are the ways that many people get into Bitcoin. I actually got into Bitcoin through a lot of the work done by Preston Pysh in the Investors Podcast Network. Him and Stig were big Buffett and Munger disciples. Speaking of Buffett and Munger, all of the Buffett and Munger disciples were in Omaha this weekend for the Berkshire annual meeting. And it's always comical to go back to this clip from Charlie Munger, who in 2013, when Bitcoin was at about $425 a coin, said that Bitcoin is rat poison.
Bitcoin, right? We need to talk about Bitcoin in a minute. I can't wait to hear what Charlie Munger has to say about this. Let's bring in Charlie Munger, the vice chair of Berkshire Hathaway. Bill's going to move over so you can come sit in. Right. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
I just had to get your thought on Bitcoin, this digital currency that's out there that people say, oh, it might be the next big thing. What do you think?
I think it's rat poison. Put him down as undecided.
Do you understand what they're trying to do with it?
No, but I regard it as deeply flaky.
Deeply flaky.
The deeply flaky coin is up over 14,759% since he made that comment. And if you added a 10% allocation to the rat poison portfolio that Berkshire has held, well, Bitcoin actually improved the returns by almost 10% a year, or 497% total over a long span of time. Talk about killer returns. You have to remember that these innovations start really small. They're nascent on the fringes. They're not practical. They're not useful. They're only used by criminals, and they never will stand a chance. When have we heard that before? It's fascinating when you look at the revenue chart of Walmart compared to Amazon over the last 25 years. 25 years ago, Walmart's revenue was 171 times larger than Amazon's. 20 years ago, it was 45 times larger. 10 years ago, it was 6 times larger. 5 years ago, it was 2 times larger. And today, they are almost neck and neck in terms of revenue. I invite you to zoom out and to see the bigger picture. and to realize that Bitcoin is actually a technological and computer science novel breakthrough that was worked on and developed by people like Hal Finney for over 30 to 40 years before Bitcoin ever launched in 2009. Bitcoin is the result of a culmination of a bunch of overlapping innovations from people who weren't paid, but people who genuinely wanted to have private money in private peer-to-peer transactions. And you know what? Bitcoin is actually the least risky thing. Ignore the volatility in the short term. Take this from Michael Saylor, who's perhaps the most bullish Bitcoiner in the entire world. And oh, by the way, whose company owns more Bitcoin than every country in the world.
This is the irony of ironies. Everybody thinks Bitcoin is risky because it's volatile. It's volatile because it's not risky. It's the lowest risk thing you can own in the world because it's the thing that has the most risk stripped away. The reason it's volatile, it's that it's the most desirable, most accessible thing, which means that everybody else is expressing their sentiment and their emotions every minute of the day, everywhere in the world, however they wish to.
Have patience, and if you like, build a deeply flaky and rat poison stack through swan.com, where your next $10,000 in purchases will be fee-free. That's right. No fees on the next $10,000 in purchases. And remember, we're here to help you on your journey. Swan's mission as a company is to educate millions of people about Bitcoin. And so if you have questions about Bitcoin and you're getting started on your journey, or you're a Bitcoin OG and vet, please send me an email, daily@swanbitcoin.com. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to connect with you. And I'd love to answer your questions if you have them. And with that, we're signing off for today. This is Dante Cook with Swan.com. Happy stacking.